everybody. I'm here with a review of the book The Witch's Guide to the Paranormal by J. Allen Cross. I am Lou, the Rocker Witch. Thank you to those of you who have returned, to my subscribers, thank you, and thank you as well to those of you, welcome to those of you who are new here. So I'm going to be giving you a rundown of this book. I finished reading this. I got this at the end of 2022. It came out last year, so it is a relatively new book. And I'll let you know what my overall thoughts are. So first of all, it is a, let me see how many pages it is. It is 237 pages, so not a super long book, but not super short either. Again, it's Llewellyn Books. It's got like this lovely rose petal finish to it that's so popular right now. It's just like so tactile and nice. Rose petal finish, I hate for oracle cards. Love it though for covers of books. So loving that that's fashionable right now. So it says flex investigative methods that only witches can wield. So this is a book written by a practicing witch who is part of a paranormal investigation team. So he's talking about the different kinds of hauntings that one might encounter, different paranormal activity, and also how he deals with it. So it is a very practical little book if you are dealing with any kind of paranormal activity, or if you're thinking of getting into, ghost hunting. So as I said, he's part of a paranormal team, so he has had experience with this. I really enjoyed this book because a lot of the things he said are also things that I personally believe as well when it comes to the paranormal. Maybe not everything, but I would say most of it. This book, I think, is very practical and easy to read. I think that it gives you a good overview of things like the different types of hauntings that can occur, different methods. He gives you lots of different options for what you can use when it comes to dealing with different types of activities. So the first part of the book, he talks about witchcraft basics. So he said he assumes that most of the people that are reading this are at least somewhat familiar with, witchcraft if they're buying this kind of book, but he still goes over some of the basic type stuff anyway. So he talks about the importance of mental magic and intention and how that is really kind of the basis for a lot of this kind of work. And he gives you lots of exercises. There is a lot of exercises in this book. So he has grounding, shielding, how to sort of clear the aura. He talks about the importance of keeping sort of your auric or spiritual hygiene up, because if you're going into spaces with a lot of paranormal activity, you want to make sure that your shields, your boundaries are up and as good as they can be. So he talks a lot about that because you want to make sure you're going in with from a position of strength. So it gives you quite a few, exercises here for, different ways to ground and different ways to strengthen the aura. He talks about protective charms as well, because like a lot of people who, do this kind of work will have charms and protective, type amulets on them. I think even just people who practice witchcraft in general tend to have those kind of things. He talks about cleansing and clearing, so how to cleanse and clear a space, because that is something that they're often called on to do when it comes to paranormal activity. And then he gives you a lot of different options for different herbs and things that you can use for cleansing. Now I notice he does not use sage in this book, which it seems to me like quite a big omission because sage is such a commonly used herb for cleansing and clearing. I wonder if it's because politically there's a lot of controversy about things like white sage, but sage grows all over the world. There's lots of different varieties. You don't have to use white sage. You can use any sage. But it's interesting that he doesn't even mention sage in here, which I think is kind of weird. But he does have lots of other options as well. And he talks about kind of what he uses them for and what he feels their different strengths and weaknesses are. He talks about water cleansing and using salt and Florida water, some pretty common things that you can use for cleansing, sound cleansing, fire cleansing, salt cleansing. So he gives you all these different options for cleansing because you're not going to have everything. Some things you're going to feel more comfortable using than others. And some things you might feel okay, this might be good for this situation, but this might be better for this kind of situation. So I think it's good that he gives lots of options. And then after talking about the witchcraft basics and cleansing and clearing, he talks about mediumship basics, because part of the work is, when you're dealing with, ghosts and things, is your earthbound spirits, you're going to have at least somebody on your team who has some basics in mediumship to be able to help these entities, or at least get an understanding from them about what is going on. So he talks about all the different kinds of mediumship. He talks about like the different clairs, like clairvoyance and clairsentience and all that. And then he gives you like some exercises for developing, your skills. So I think this is really good, because I think, you do need, if you're doing this kind of work, some kind of mediumship going on, whether it's yourself or another person that's more sensitive. And then he talks about like reading a home, like walking around the home, and how you sense things and picking things up. He talks about using tools like pendulums here. So, he gives you an idea of how to kind of like figure out what's going on in a home. And then he gives you some paranormal investigation basics. So code of ethics, very important. One thing he talks about in here that I completely agree with is he says, there are a lot of investigation teams where they just want to go in and take pictures and document things, but they don't actually help the people who are living and working in that space. And what they tend to do is they often rile things up. They like create a lot of activity, and then they just walk away. It's like going into someone's house and like messing everything up and then just going, see ya, and walking away. And I don't think that's very ethical when it comes to like investigation, because when people have reached out to somebody, it's usually because the activity has become, something that's a problem, because most people, they don't know who to reach out to. And also they're afraid of being seen as like crazy, right? So by the time that they reach out to somebody, it's usually because the activity has become quite upsetting. And the last thing that they need is for somebody to come in and just like mess everything up. So he talks about code of ethics. He also talks about like setting your limits, knowing what you can deal with and what you can't. And then I really enjoy this part here where he talks about the kind of team you should have, like the different sort of roles that people can have in sort of an investigation team. He talks about the importance of debunking, because sometimes people think that they're hearing knocks in the wall, and it could just be like mice, or it could be like a plumbing issue. Like it may not have anything to do with the paranormal at all. Like you always have to look at like sort of like the real world first. Not saying paranormal stuff isn't real, but you know what I mean? Like the mundane is probably a better term for that. And then he talks about the different tools, a lot of the different tools that you might see if you're like me and you love to watch ghost hunting shows, things like, spirit boxes, using pendulums, those kind of things. And then he'll go into conducting like an EVP session, which is electronic voice phenomena. It's often when you record, you use like a recorder and record voices that you can't hear with your ears. So he talks about that. And then he talks about like the whole process of going through a whole investigation, like the first contact. And he talks about, what kind of questions to ask and sort of the order of things, like how you do things, which I think is really good, like very, very practical. The kind of questions you need to ask, some common scenarios you're going to run into, and how to do an investigation and what you need to do on an investigation. And then he goes into the different kinds of hauntings. So he talks about, everything. There's a whole section on residual haunting, which is probably the most common. And a residual haunting is when there's like an echo of an event that repeats. So it's not like there's a person, like a soul that's stuck. It's just that there's an event that's repeating, almost like it's like a stain or like a recording that just keeps going over and over again. He also talks about like dealing with ghosts, earthbound spirits, why people might be stuck, what's kind of going on with them, and how you can kind of deal with them. He talks too about poltergeists, and poltergeists, I agree with him on, there's lots of different theories, but one of the theories about poltergeists is that poltergeists they're not like a ghost. What it is it is energy from a person that is going through a lot of changes. They are not consciously doing it, but subconsciously they're repressing a bunch of different energy and emotion, and it has to go somewhere. And so it becomes sort of its own energy that causes disruptions around a home or wherever. So it often centers, the stereotype sort of is that it's teenage girls, but it really can be anyone. But it is more common amongst, I find, like teenagers, and also sometimes people like women going through menopause. But it's not just like teenagers and menopausal women. Seems to be a little more common because of the hormonal changes and fluctuations. But it can really be anyone. Especially find people who've gone through like a trauma and they are suppressing it, and they also have like a lot of psychic abilities that they're also repressing. Seems to be like a formula for poltergeist activity. So he talks a lot about that. The activity will often center around one particular person. So it's interesting talking about that, and how often when they go to get help to resolve some of their issues, the activity ceases. So I kind of have the same opinion about what poltergeists are. He talks too about inhuman spirits, and inhuman spirits doesn't just mean like everyone thinks like, ooh, scary demon. It can be like fae, it can be elementals. Sometimes a place just has a spirit. There's also things that we just don't know about. Things like, there's all these debate about what like shadow people are. So he talks a lot about that. He talks about thought forms. All these things that are, like inhuman spirits, but they're still doing things, they're still affecting things. And then he talks about negative entities, and he talks about what you can do about them. He talks about, how you can identify where they are, what you can do to remove them, and how to remove attachments. So that's really, really important, I think, because those are obviously the ones that are the most, I think, dangerous, and the ones that cause people the most issues. And then he talks about your magical toolkit, what you might want to have as far as like items that you might want to have, herbs, minerals, candles, different things like that you want to have. And he ends it with a section called Portals, Doorways, and Highways. And that is about, if you have like a portal in your house, or highways are kind of like energy currents that, the dead seem to follow. And so if there's one in your house, that is obviously going to cause some disruptions. So he talks about how to deal with that. So that's the overview of the book. Overall, I would say I found this book very interesting, very easy to read, very straightforward in his advice and his opinions. And he's very clear that, anybody who says they have all the answers about what everything is full of poop. Because, we're dealing with the paranormal. Nobody knows what's going on. We just have our best guesses, our best educated guesses, and the experience of like what seems to have worked and what doesn't seem to have worked. And every situation is a bit different. So I appreciate his honesty. I also appreciate like the stories in here of different things that he's dealt with. I think one of the scariest ones was a family that kept seeing doppelgangers of themselves. That like the doppelganger thing just like freaks me out. So I loved hearing all the stories here, but I also loved that it had lots of practical exercises and things that you can do if you are experiencing any of these things, and some advice about if you're interested in getting into paranormal type of investigation. So overall, I would give this 4.5 stars out of 5. I thought it was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I love all sorts of ghosty, spooky things. So if you like that and you're just curious about it, I would highly recommend this book. If you don't like ghosts, if that freaks you out, then maybe don't read this book. This book may not be for you. But I really like this book. I really enjoyed it. If you have this book, let me know what you thought of this book. Let me know if it is on your to-read list, if it's one that you're thinking of getting. Also, let me know, too, if you're like one of those people who is like, no, I'm not going anywhere near ghost stuff. I love to hear it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you want to support this channel, I do have a Patreon, which you can check out in the links below. If you want a reading from me, I also have an Etsy shop as well that you can check out in the links below. But thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my patrons. You guys are the best. You're so awesome. And thank you to all of you who comment and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And as always, peace and love.